cut. Welcome to the top cut. Welcome to the top cut. Welcome to the top cut. Top cut. Welcome to the top cut. Welcome to the top cut. Welcome to the top cut.
Today's episode is brought to you by Gem Accessories. Gem Accessories is one of the leading accessory manufacturers within the trading card game space. Known for their deck boxes, Gem also has an amazing lineup of binders, backpacks, and more. Some of our personal favorites include the new KLRZ Icons deck boxes, the Secrets binder, and the Jaguar and Puma backpacks. But don't just take it from us, check out some of these reviews on screen. For all of these amazing products and more, be sure to check out Gem Accessories using the link in the description down below or on Twitter at XGemAccessories. Again, the description down below or on Twitter at XGemAccessories. Hello, everybody, and welcome into today's episode of the Top Cut Yu-Gi-Oh! Podcast. I, of course, am Sunny. I am here with my co-host, Caleb.
Hello.
And I promise this is our first time recording this intro.
Take one.
Yeah. Surely.
It's secretly take two.
Nope.
Because someone forgot
Nope.
to press the record button.
Only on the audio. I got the recording on video, just not on audio. I blame you.
What did I do?
I don't know, but I'm sure there's something. And if there's not, then there will be.
Okay, whatever.
All right, of course, we want to thank all of you for coming into today's episode of the podcast. We are genuinely thankful that you are all here. And, of course, we want to thank all of our wonderful sponsors. So thank you to Gem TCG, who I'm sure you heard an ad for a second ago, as well as, of course, Dragon Shield and TCG Player, who have given us affiliate links, which are both down below. Click them before you shop to support the podcast at no extra cost to yourself. And, of course, we want to thank Millennium Threads for their awesome link, code, and products. You can use code TOPCUT10 at checkout for 10% off your entire order. So, of course, the number one way that you can support the podcast at no extra cost to yourself is if you enjoy it, be sure to tell a friend. That way they can enjoy it too. And they can have this twice a week dose of us in their lives.
And maybe they'll want it 3 times a week. And that's where the patron comes in.
True.
Patreon.
And of course, if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, there is a follow or subscribe button. And of course, there's always a subscribe button on YouTube. And there's also a little notification bell if you want to know every time we post something. So, which I promise we won't overload you. We're not that consistent. Well, we're very consistent on our main episodes, just not on. Yeah. All right, and of course, let's thank all of our wonderful patrons. So, like Caleb said, if you are on the patrons, then if you're on the $5 and up tier, you get an extra episode every week. So, a huge thank you to Cam Yang, Top Cuts Trouble Sunny, and Caleb, Austin Johnson, Kane Martin, Marshawn Jones, Zyphris, Yeet the Feet, AD, Ash Blossom, and No Joy. Knew it for the catnip Lord Vader, Cat Sith. Cat Sith.
I am not dignifying this with a response.
Knew it.
Do it.
Earth Machine Best Deck, Epi, Has Anyone Actually Read Toy Vendor, HGH Cyber, I Am McLincoln, Imagine Playing Yu-Gi-Oh! In 2022 on Earth and the Milky Way Galaxy, In the Universe on Earth in 2022 playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Jarrett Helton, Mountain Man, Oatmeal Spaghetti, Owen Alvarado, Pig, Quitting the Game is a Floodgate, Rudolph Sprite Farter, Tearlewin's Happiness, Floodgate in Your Mouth, Unbanned Number 95, Konami, Understanding and Reading are 2 different things, Virtually Saviors, World, Aaron Gardner, Asami, Ashless Chaps, Brandon Potter, Cyberdark and Dragon is Actually Broken, Duty Booty, Dragon, Maidenless Behavior, Fur Hire, Dog Turd. It's such a cheap, easy laugh.
Oh my god.
Jerry Beans, man. King Henry, Old Man Red, Pin Code 143, Ray Powell, Shockmaster did nothing wrong, Slaking it up, Sonny is a freaky worm guy, and Vampire Frauline's the only waifu a person should have. Isn't that right, Sonny? No, it's not right.
For a myriad of reasons.
That I'm not going to justify right now.
Because we don't have time.
And I don't need to explain myself to you.
Yeah. So instead, I will fill this space with more Palpatine jokes.
Okay.
Palpatine, what are we going to do with all this day-old meat? Stew it. Palpatine, my pencil broke. What am I going to do? Glue it.
Palpatine, I need some place to sit. What do I do?
I don't know. What do you do?
I had a
move it.
No, wait, I had a punchline and I forgot what it was. It was something to do with a chair, but I don't know what it was. I don't even know how a chair... I don't even know what you do. How did I lose the joke mid-joke?
How do you lose a joke mid-joke, Sonny?
I don't know. I genuinely don't
You
know.
just do it. Got him. Ow.
I threw it. Okay. While we're here, and in this segment that doesn't really, like, have a purpose...
Outside of us just goofing off.
Let's do a little thing where we tell each other what we learned for the day. Did you learn anything new today?
Yes, actually.
What did you learn?
So I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos, listening to a lot of YouTube videos while I'm at work, and just on the history of various video games.
Sure.
And I learned that in Super Mario 64, Bowser... I already knew that Bowser and Boo had the exact same laugh, it's just sped up or slowed down.
Sure.
What I learned was that specific sound audio file that they sped up and slowed down to make Boo and Bowser's laughs came from a sound library where they also got a lot of the rest of Bowser's sounds. There's like bobcats and other animals, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's just a generic dude laughing. That sound was recorded in 1980 by Charles Martinet, who then, a decade later, would be voice acting Mario in Super Mario 64.
Huh. That's
So-
like some small world type stuff.
Yeah, so technically Charles Martinet voiced Mario, Bowser, and Boo in that game.
That is 8 degrees of separation right there.
It's funny, and I love it. It's just a hilarious little story.
So I also learned something new today. Did you know, and this is, I can't believe I learned this today, Albert Einstein was a real person?
Yeah. I know this joke, but I'm going to let you tell it.
I always just thought he was a theoretical physicist. I also learned that dogs technically don't have foreheads. They just have one. That's all they need.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So today, as I'm sure you... I hate this. I hate bad jokes, but I love them so much. My inner dad just... So, of course, as I'm sure you saw in the today's title and thumbnail of the video, we are, of course, talking about deck building in Yu-Gi-Oh! Woohoo! I would say in Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck building is far and away the most important aspect of your game.
The game before the game.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great way to put it.
It's the game of 4D chess before you play a game of normal chess.
Right. Deck building is such a critical and integral part of Yu-Gi-Oh! And not just Yu-Gi-Oh! But other card games as well. You can, of course, find optimal deck building in Yu-Gi-Oh!, Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, and any card game that you play. Because deck building is what allows you to play the game in the way you want to play it.
And what I've always found hilarious is that the deck building sometimes isn't the way you would think it would work.
Yeah, it's not always intuitive.
For a great example of this is Pokemon, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So, for those who don't know, the way Pokemon works is that in order to declare attacks, you have to have energy, and you can only attach 1 energy per turn.
Sure.
A lot of decks only run like you have a 60-card deck. A lot of decks only run like 10 energy.
Really?
Yeah. I have an old Machamp EX deck. I run 10 energy total.
Wow.
Hold on. I run Machamp. I run like 4 copies of Machamp EX,
Uh-huh.
2 Regirock,
Okay.
and a Regirock EX.
Which alone costs way more than 10 energy to do what they want to do.
Yeah, if I was to play them all.
Yeah.
Ideally, I'll never play them all.
Right.
So, and that's it. Those are all my Pokemon. Everything else are trainer cards.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because you get trainer cards like Ultra Ball, which you just go and fetch Pokemon and place on your bench. Other things let you grab energies out of your discard pile. Others just let you go and fetch them out of your deck.
Right.
There's so much draw. Just off of the professors letting you discard your hand, draw 7.
Yes, yes.
So deck building just isn't very intuitive because you would never think to do that
Right.
based on the game mechanics or even the way the structure decks are set up.
Yeah.
Because they always have like 20 energy in them.
Right.
So, just an example of deck building not being intuitive sometimes.
Yeah, and I'll give I'll let you all know where we got the inspiration for this episode. So I've recently picked up playing some Magic the Gathering. This is something that Caleb has dabbled with a fair amount in the past, and we have a lot of other friends that play Magic either at a fairly competitive level or even just
Kitchen table.
kitchen table, right?
Yeah, we're sticking on the kitchen table side.
Yeah, and I might go to the shop and get games in there, but I probably won't be a high-level tournament player where I'm traveling for events and things like that. Just something to play with friends when I want a bit of a break from Yu-Gi-Oh!
Yeah.
And not even like taking a break necessarily, but
just don't
switch it up a little bit.
Yeah, so that way you don't burn out.
Exactly. So, what I've been doing since I'm very new to Magic overall, I have a basic idea of some of the mechanics. I know the idea of tapping cards. I know the idea of playing mana and, having mana that synergizes with your deck and things like that. But I had no idea of the synergies within the cards themselves and things like that. So in an effort to learn more and better educate myself about a game that I am learning, I went to, of course, the most natural resource that anybody can use, which is YouTube. And of course, I start watching Tolarian Community College, one of the
Great YouTube channel, by the way. If you're interested in Magic, hit them up.
Absolutely. So Tolarian Community College is one of the largest Magic the Gathering YouTube channels, period.
And the guy behind it actually does dabble in Yu-Gi-Oh! A little bit.
Very little bit.
Literally the same amount that me and Sonny are dabbling in Magic.
Or less.
Yeah, just kitchen table on a rare occasion.
Yes. But the idea, though, is that a lot of his videos are very informative and teaching based about the game. Well, so it's a natural resource for a new player who wants to get into the game, which is perfect for me. So one of the videos that he did was proper deck building in Magic. And I thought to myself, I would like to delve into this a little bit with Yu-Gi-Oh! Because as a whole, Yu-Gi-Oh! Doesn't have a lot of guides or resources on deck building. Now, you can find tons of really super duper in-depth discussion on the minutia of deck building.
But no rule of thumb.
Yes, exactly. So, for example, Patrick Hoban's book, Road of the King. It is a wonderful, wonderful tool that teaches you about a myriad of different things across the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! It teaches you about the mind games that happen sometimes before the game even starts. When you sit down at the table. The intricacies of deck building at, like I said, like a minutia level. And it teaches you all these things, but I feel that there's a certain amount of predicated knowledge that is expected before you read a book like this. It's not a book that just anybody can pick up and read. And I feel like there needs to be an earlier setup to get into something like this. So that's why we're going to talk about, when deck building, focusing on things like consistency, sealing, and these different things, even as much as something just like committing to a plan.
Mm-hmm.
These are things that aren't necessarily spoken or said for Yu-Gi-Oh!, but they are just as important as sitting down and drawing your opening hand.
Mm-hmm. Let's call this Yu-Gi-Oh! 102.
Yes.
More complicated than 101, but also still very basic information.
And stuff that's extremely important to understand at a fundamental level.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go ahead and dive on in with the first point, which is that archetypes are an important part of Yu-Gi-Oh!
They are everything.
Yeah. And when we say archetypes, we mean when you read the name on a card, it might say, for example, Atlantean Dragoons, right? Or Machina Fortress. But say there's another card that's Machina Gearframe or Machina Ruin Force. And you end up with these cards that are all parts of the same archetype. So, in essentially, this is the game's creators saying, we want you to take this group of cards
And use them together.
exactly. So take these cards, put them together, deck build around this strategy to give yourself an idea of what you want to see your deck do.
Oh yeah. And then like a lot of the time, then 9 times out of 10, those cards with similar names will have effects that kind of build on each other a little bit.
Exactly.
Actually, a fantastic example of that would be the Medolches, because their whole shtick is just swarming the field and then making rank 4s.
Right.
So you have you have the Angeli, who can fetch 1 out of your deck, which then can proc its effect, which can proc the effect of Petting Cessor, who fetches the Pudding Cess and lowers her level by 1 to 4. Boom, you got a rank 4, which then fetches another rank, fetches a Hoot Cake, who then fetches another monster, whose effect fetches a spell activate, which then fetches, and they all just kind of flow into each other to get my microphone to get their stuff going. I'm talking with my hands here, but it's kind of a cyclical effect.
Yes. So
With Medolche as an example of how archetypes are supposed to work together.
exactly. Even like you said, Medolche Magdalene, normal summon, search Medolche. Machinas have the same thing with Machina Gear Frame. Normal summon Gear Frame, search any Machina monster.
And then like all the Machinas are machine, so Machina Fortress is pitch 2 machines to special summon it.
And you can even see this in the extra deck. So a good example would be in Sword Soul. You have Sword Soul of Mo Yi. You normal summon it, reveal a worm in your hand, and summon a level 4 token tuner.
And hey, guess what? All the Sword Souls are all worms.
Yes. And this allows you to synchro summon into a level 8, which the Sword Souls have a level 8 synchro called Sword Soul of Qishao, which is or Sword Soul Grandmaster Qishao, which is a level 8 worm synchro, which requires a worm tuner, or no, one tuner plus 1 worm non-tuner. So as a result, this being a worm deck and going for worm monsters in the extra deck allows you this ability to build on itself and make it go somewhere that is intentional. But because of the design of Yu-Gi-Oh, there's this inherent ability to make it pair not just with the archetype, but with potentially anything.
Yeah, some parts of archetypes are just kind of generic. A great example of that, I believe, is Gear Jigen X, I believe.
Yeah.
Detach 1, search for a machine.
Yes, absolutely.
Reinforcement of the Army. Great example of a generic card. It's just search a level 4 lower warrior. Easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Level is it 4 or 3?
4 or lower.
Okay,
Because you can search Stratos.
An emergency teleport is a level 3. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
of.
yeah. So what I mean by generic is with Elemental Heroes, they run E-Emergency Call, which is an in-archetype search. You can't in-archetype search the search E-Call, E-Emergency Call, but you can just activate it and search for hero. They also run, on top of that, Reinforcement of the Army, because all of them are warriors, so it just kind of fits.
Right. So, like we're saying, these archetypes are a very integral part of the game. Understanding what archetype you want to play, or even if you're not playing an archetype, a general overarching strategy that you want to play. Do you want to play more mid-range? Do you want to play more combo? Do you want to play control?
Oh, yeah. Like, ideally, you want to figure out what style of play you want to do, and then you're going to want to figure out what archetypes can do that.
For example, if I wanted to play control, I know that I would probably want to play either Altergeist or Eldritch. Probably Eldritch.
Or Labyrinth.
Right. If I want to play mid-range, some great mid-range decks are things like Sword Soul or Tri-Brigade.
Yeah.
Or Prank Kids originally, right after Meow Moo came out, was a great mid-range deck. Or if I want to play full-on combo, I could play something like Drytron.
Dragon Link.
Tear Laments these days is the most, obvious.
Sprite.
Sprite is a mid-range deck.
Really?
Yeah.
It feels really combo-y to me.
It can potentially.
I think because it like starts out as a combo deck, but it ends on a mid-range board.
Yeah, it's got a lot of follow-through.
Yeah.
So the thing to keep in mind here is if you want a control strat, you want something that's going to slow the game down to your pace that you decide and advantage your opponent out of the game. If you want combo, it's something that's going to maybe have a long first turn, but realistically end on a board that your opponent won't be able to break, and then you kill them the next turn. Mid-range wants to take kind of an in-between approach.
Yeah, best of both worlds.
Right, where you take kind of a slower approach to building your original board. It's a less overwhelming board, but your goal is to just try to live to next turn, just enough interruption to live, and then next turn you can immediately go ahead and go off enough to kill your opponent. Or, if need be, if you don't kill them that turn, well, then you live to the next turn and do it next turn. And
a lot of these decks, a lot of the mid-range decks can also just kind of go, oh no, you broke my board. Just reset up the exact same board again.
yes.
Oh no, you did it again.
Yeah, exactly.
And they just keep setting up the same board over and over and over. And
Usually the mid-range decks are marked by a lot of engine recursion, but also an explosiveness.
explosive when it's needed. Key
Right.
term.
What you give up in control is ceiling. What you give up in combo is usually consistency.
I would say longevity as well.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. There is a certain amount of you hope the game doesn't go 4 or 5 turns.
Yeah.
And then mid-range, what you give up is a little bit of ceiling and a little bit of consistency. So, I would say decide what you want to play. Once you decide what you want to play, decide what archetype you want to play and build around that archetype.
Yeah. Now, let's just say for the sake of argument that you've picked an archetype and no one else is, not very many other people are playing the archetype. I find myself in that position a lot.
True.
Because just between Marincess, when I picked it up, barely anyone was playing the deck at the time. Labyrinth right now, not a whole lot of people are playing it. I can only think of like a handful of people that are playing it, including myself. So then I gotta sit there and figure out a lot of the stuff on my own instead of looking up a deck list.
Right.
So how do we go about doing that?
Well, the first thing you can do is commit to a plan.
Yes.
So,
A lot of archetypes though have built-in plans already.
yeah, sure.
So the trick is to read the cards and identify. First off, you got to read the cards.
That's very important. Read the cards.
And then that'll help you so that we can identify what the deck is actively trying to do.
Right. Once you understand an end goal of the deck, you can figure out what cards are going to further your strategy to achieve that end goal. Right? Something like a dinosaur deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is going to have an end goal of creating an opposing board that your opponent won't be able to break through use of things like Dolka, Lagia, potentially even like a Borreload Savage Dragon, depending, or even an Abyss Dweller. And then even UCT.
Oh yeah, using UCT to stop your opponent from making plays.
Right.
Which is insane that you can do that with him.
Yeah, it's crazy. So you have to decide what your strategy is and figure out what cards are going to get you to that strategy. Now, what I would say is another thing that you need to decide is whether you're going first or second. Because once you build out the engine of your deck, this is the thing that makes your deck tick. This is the thing that makes your deck go and gets you to that ending. Mm-hmm. You're also going to have some extra space, usually about 10 to 12 spots of space, sometimes 15 if it's a smaller engine. And you need to decide if your plan is to go first or to go second.
If your plan is to go first, that means you need to stop your opponent from being able to play. So you run extra, and you also need to keep your opponent from keeping you from playing.
Right. So I think when you're going first, the things you want to include in your deck list are things that are going to allow you to insulate the board that you're already making. So in a deck like Eldritch, I would maybe be running things like Floodgates if I'm planning on going first.
Cyframe Gear Gamma.
Sure. Not in Eldritch, but yeah.
Well, I mean, it can stop the Ash on the Sanguine.
I mean, I guess.
Yeah,
I wouldn't run any hand traps in Eldritch.
Yeah, it's just as an example.
Right. If it's not a good example. Don't do that.
There are better things to do.
I would run Floodgates in Eldritch.
Yeah.
If I'm in more of a combo deck, I might run something that gives my deck a little bit more consistency, because realistically in a combo deck, your ceiling is your extra insulation. And then in a mid-range deck, I would probably run a lot of hand traps, because usually in these mid-range decks, there's a way to at least draw a card or two. And you really want to draw into hand traps, because if, a combo board might have 4 monsters that all have negates and this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
Whereas with a mid-rangey deck, I can have maybe 2 monsters on board with maybe 1 back row, and like 3 or 4 cards in my hand, and maybe a couple of those are hand traps. Those represent extra forms of interruption, but I don't have to commit them to my board.
Yeah, and then another card you kind of also have to consider if you're going first is Solemn Judgment. If you're doing combo and or
Control.
Combo, mid-range, or control. Actually, all 3 of them.
I think Solemn Judgment is more of a side deck card.
Oh, definitely, but it's still something to consider
Right.
because of exactly board breakers.
I guess, yeah. So
We'll get into those when we're talking about going second.
So going second.
Yeah, it's a great transition there.
Yeah, good segue. So going second is going to be a little bit different of a strategy. When you're going second, a lot of times you're looking for big blowout cards that are going to heavily swing the favor of the game in your favor. So cards like these are Dark Ruler No More, Forbidden Droplet,
Super Poly if you can run it.
Super Poly is a great one, Lightning Storm, Harpy's Feather Duster, Regeki, Monster Reborn even can be a blowout card.
Now, if you notice something about a lot of these cards, if you just kind of so happen to know what they do offhand, a lot of them are just kind of, you lose everything if you don't negate this.
Right.
It forces an interaction.
Yes.
And then a good chunk of the other ones were just your opponent can't respond to them.
Yes.
So, solves the problem anyway.
Absolutely. It is so important in Yu-Gi-Oh! To understand that if you commit to one of these strategies, you kind of need to go all in on it. If you're committed to going second, at this day and age and this point in time, I'm probably playing 3 Mystic Mine, 3 Forbidden Droplet, and 3 Dark Ruler No More, and maybe something else along the lines of Lightning Storm. And honestly, maybe also something else like a Duster.
Yeah, there's a lot of things you can run in that kind of situation and then go in second.
Right.
Again, if your deck can run it, Super Poly is always good.
Absolutely, yeah. Super Poly is a really great card, even especially in today's meta.
Especially with the likes of Mudragon, the Swamp, and Garura running around.
Yes.
Which are just generic.
Yeah. But I would also caution you in that blowout cards, I know when you read these cards, it's like, wow, this card's insane. But you need to understand that it's not the end-all, be-all. So, a good thing to remember is, Regeki is at 3. But it's at 3 for a reason. A lot of times, you don't want to commit too much to these blowout cards, because at the end of the day, in a metagame that has a lot of negation, a lot of countering your cards, something like a Regeki not resolving ends up just being a -1.
Mm-hmm.
So, therefore, you don't really want to super duper overcommit to these cards unless you feel that it's going to give you an excessive advantage swing. So, Lightning Storm would get you there. Same thing with Dark Ruler No More. Dark Ruler No More, in terms of pure card advantage, how the cards actually change when the card is played. Dark Ruler No More is a -1. But it is such a tempo swing that it effectively can cause you to go plus.
It literally looks at your opponent's board and says, that's a nice board you have there. It'd be a shame if anything were to happen to it.
Right.
On the topic also of stuff to just stop your opponent's negates, there's also Kaijus and an Lava Golem.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who essentially serve the same purpose, but they do it in a different way.
Yeah, these are also great going second cards. The only thing I would really try to keep in mind is that depending on what your strategy is, and the things that you lose to, you need, and what's really popular in the meta, you need to be able to decide whether you want to run Lava Golem or Winged Dragon of Raw Sphere mode
one
or
of the
a Kaiju.
Kaijus. 9 times out of 10, the Kaiju is Gamma Seal, and like second most commonly used one I think is Godarla.
Yes.
Yeah.
Basically, anytime there's a wind barrier statue, Godarla is the Kaiju of choice.
Yeah, because you can distribute over the barrier statue.
Right. So, I would say that you need to think about what your strategy is, commit to it, and understand that you don't want to overcommit, which is the next point, actually.
Yes.
Don't overcommit to certain things, because something like too many hand traps or board breakers can potentially cause your deck to be bricky.
Yeah, because then you open a hand of nothing but board breakers, and you're just like, oh,
Right.
well, you're not going to have a field, but neither am I.
Yeah.
Or you open a hand of hand traps and go, neither one of us are going to get to play this game.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
But to be fair, this huge committal can be offset to a certain degree with certain consistency cards. So this is what we were talking about earlier. We mentioned that you can play Reinforcement of the Army in your warrior deck. You can play Emergency Teleport in a lot of different decks, which, yeah, you're playing 3 of it, but it essentially functions as less cards in your deck.
Yeah, it is because it turns into another card in your deck, basically. It's
Right.
great example of that is if you're running, let's say you're running 5 warriors in your deck for whatever reason, and then you're running your 1 copy of Rhoda, you're actually running 6 warriors, because that Rhoda is just going to turn into one of those warriors that you need.
Right. So you also have cards like Upstart Goblin or Pot of Desires, Duality in certain decks, Prosperity, or Extravagance.
Back in the day, you're going to find this is good information about Upstart Goblin real quick. Back in the day, you might see people, if you go on old forums, and still people saying, hey, just run a 37 card deck. You're like, how is that possible? Upstart Goblin's how that's possible. Pulling against 1,000 life points, you draw a card.
This is a theory that was put into place by Patrick Hoban around 2011, 2012.
Yes. Which is part of the reason why Upstart Goblin's at 1 right now.
It's the entire reason
Yeah.
Upstart Goblin's at 1.
Because it allows you to run a 39 card deck.
Yeah, so there's a theory that in Yu-Gi-Oh, life points don't truly matter. The only life point that truly matters is the last one.
Mm-hmm.
So giving your opponent 1,000 life points, that's fine if it allows me to run essentially a 37 card deck. Because if you draw an opening hand of 5 cards and one of them is Upstart Goblin, well, then you just move on to the next card.
Mm-hmm.
So it is essentially placeholder cards that do nothing but allow you to get more cards into your hand. It's the entire reason Upstart is currently limited.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. So now at best, you can run a 39 card deck.
Right. If you want to get into that draw power, the best you can do is Pot of Extravagance, which will at most draw you 5 cards over the course of 3 turns.
Mm-hmm.
Or something like Pot of Prosperity, which allows you to dig really deep.
Oh, real deep.
Yes.
As in revealing the top 6 cards and adding one of them to your hand.
Right. Or Pot of Desires, which if you're running more of a mid-rangey deck like Sword Soul or Tri-Brigade, I know I keep saying them, but that's because I've played them
And
exclusively almost for the past year and a half.
and your deck consists of a series of 3 ofs.
Right, where you really only need one of them to really go off.
Yeah, it's like, I'll banish 10 off the top. Let's go.
Right, and then it's just consistency. So having the ability to add this consistency to your deck can really, really patch or fix a lot of issues, but don't let that cloud you from, okay, I need a certain amount of engine in my deck to make it go. You know, if you have a deck that is a 2-card combo kind of deck, then I would say that you need to be wary of having too many non-engine cards. You know, if you're running a deck that is a 1-card combo deck, well, then you can, like Prank Kids was a great example. It was a 1-card combo deck, and you could get there. You usually ran about 15 or 16, about 16 ways, either Prank Kids or ways to get a Prank Kid.
Yeah.
So that left you a lot of room to run non-engine cards as well as consistency cards.
Yeah, because then as long as you drew a name or a way to get into a name, you had full combo.
Exactly. So the last thing that I want to really say, and I really want this one to hammer home, because this is maybe the most important thing I will say. The side deck is just as important as the main deck.
If not more important in some rare instances.
Absolutely. So a great example of this. I go to a tournament. I am ready. I've built my deck and I'm raring to go. I sit down across from my opponent game one. What is he playing? Eldritch. I'm not playing dedicated back row removal in my main deck.
Yeah, you've got like the one Cosmic Cyclone in case you encounter Mystic Mine, and that's about it.
Exactly. So the solution here for me is to take that and account for that weakness in my side deck. I run 5 to 6 back row removal cards.
Yeah.
Dedicated back row.
Yeah.
Twin Twisters, Cosmic Cyclones, Lightning Storm, Harpy Feather Duster. And
Evenly matched.
yeah, evenly matched can even be a great blowout against decks like that are advantage based, because if you can hit them with a 3-for-1 or a 4-for-1, that's huge.
Especially because then you put them in a situation of use it or lose it.
Absolutely.
And if they can't use it,
Yes.
oh well.
So I think that if you're in a situation where you can cover the weaknesses of your deck through the use of the side deck, it's very, very tempting to build your deck, get it down to 40 cards for maximum consistency, because consistency is king in Yu-Gi-Oh! Get it down to 40 cards, maximum consistency, you're raring to go. It's really tempting to take those last few cards that you cut for your main deck
And just put them in the
and
side.
just put them in the side deck. But you really don't want to do that. You want to have a game plan for the decks that you are going against. You want to know what you're going to do going first and know what you're going to do going second.
Like, the only time you ever want to run just more copies of cards you have in your main deck is, as far as I know, exactly Cosmic Cyclone.
Potentially.
Because you're maining one for exactly Mystic Mine, so you don't auto-lose game one, and then you put the other two in the side.
I would say that...
There's better ways of doing it, but...
Yeah, the thing that you need to really remember is there are just some things that you can't do in just the main just the main deck.
Yeah.
For example, like I said, if I wanted to plan for going first, well, then I'm running a bunch of hand traps, but then I go into game 2 and I won game 1 because I deck built properly. Well, I go to game 2 and I know my opponent's going to want to go first because I've seen their deck list. I saw how they played the game. Well, I see that they're going to want to go first, so I decide that I'm going to bring out a bunch of my going first cards. Things like I might bring out Ash Blossom, I might bring out Nibiru, and depending on what I'm bringing in, right? So I might bring in things like Dark Ruler No More, or Forbidden Droplet, or Mystic Mine, cards that we've talked about. And when bringing these cards in, it gives you a sense of dedicated... what's the word I'm looking for, Caleb? I'm bringing these cards in, and it gives me a sense of a cohesive strategy.
Cohesion, I guess, is the word.
Right. So just the ability to really commit to this strategy is something that the side deck can provide. But understand, if you're doing broad sweeping changes, like doing a full going first strategy to a full going second board breaker strategy, then know what cards you're bringing out going first and going second. If you're more game planning for specific metas, for example, when Tri-Brigade was a popular deck, Lancia was the best side deck card just about.
Mm-hmm.
In heavy combo formats, Droll Lockbird is one of the best side deck cards. And as you get into these different cards in these different formats, then you have to understand what cards you're bringing in for what matchups and what cards you're bringing in those matchups going first versus going second. And just as important is what cards you're going to bring out. I try not to side out engine cards if I can, But if I do side out engine cards, I'm siding out maybe those one of cards that, you know, give my deck that blowout. You know, I don't want to side deck out my main consistency cards.
Yeah.
If I'm playing Sorcel, I don't want to side out Sorcel Emergence.
But you might side out like a Pot of Desires.
I might side out more of like a... I mean, I have sided out Pot of Desires. Yeah, I have. But I'm thinking more like I would side out like the Sorcel Sacred Summit, the revive spell.
Yeah. Because it's less... It's still a good card, it's just less useful.
Right.
As opposed to, I don't know, evenly matched.
Right. All right. Well, I think that we've really effectively made our point.
Yes. I think like the only thing we really didn't discuss is specifically how to come up with the individual numbers of cards.
Sure, let's touch on that real quick.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So basically the first thing you want to do is pick your archetype. Once you've done that, you need to identify what the deck is trying to do and what cards can help you push that at that.
Right.
Because a lot of archetypes have cards that kind of do the archetype thing, but not very well.
Right.
A great example actually is like some of the older, like a great example of that actually is Medolce Mufuel, or Mufui, or however you pronounce it. It's an old one that back in the day was used. It's just not used anymore because it just doesn't do what it needs, do what the deck wants to do anymore.
Yeah.
Which is put out level 4s.
Right.
Because it's a level 3 and it brings a level 4 out with it. It's just not worth it.
Right.
I think a better example of that would be I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head, but I'm failing miserably.
Of a card that you would run how many of?
Like you wouldn't run because it just doesn't, like one of the archetype cards you would just ignore.
Right. So Geargia has a few cards like that, like Geargia Augur or Geargia Attacker or something like that, which is like the jet. They're just not cards that are really a cohesive strategy within the Geargia archetype.
Yeah. Like I'm trying to think of some more pertinent, like some more recent ones.
So another recent one would be in the Swordsoul deck. You have Swordsoul Auspice Chojin.
Yeah, the big bulldog looking dude. Yeah,
right.
Not
so
run.
He's a level 6, but unlike Longyan, he can't summon himself from the hand.
So you have to tribute summon him pretty much, or summon him off of like.
There's another weird way you can get him out, but it's not worth it. And
Yeah.
he doesn't have an effect to summon a token, so it does not mesh well with the deck. So it's basically completely unplayable.
Yeah. So first,
just a reminder to everybody, that card got a super rare, but Swordsoul Blackout didn't.
yeah. So that's one of the things that's one of the first couple things you're going to want to try and identify is cards that's like, yeah, they just don't fit with
The strategy.
So we're just going to put those aside.
Yes.
Then the way and I think people do this different ways. The way I did it was that then I sat down to identify what my starters are, what the cards that just on summon fetch something else,
Right.
or cards that are just discard fetch something else. I like to, when I'm deck building, I like to start at 3 with those
Okay.
because that just gives you a bunch of consistency.
Sure.
And then from there, you kind of build out to, okay, this card's a brick, but I need it for the deck to work.
Right.
So that's a one of.
So the general rule of thumb that's always cited, whether it be in books, whether you watch YouTube videos, whether you're talking to your friend at your local, the one rule of thumb that everyone in Yu-Gi-Oh goes by is, if the card is in your deck, how often do you want to see it? If you want to see your card
Every opening hand.
Yeah, if you want to see it every opening hand, every time, no matter what, you need to see this card. You play 3.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a brick that you kind of need for your deck to function optimally, but you really don't want to see it in your opening hand, you just run 1.
I actually have a fantastic example of that, and that's actually Medolce Pudding Cess.
Yes, exactly.
She is needed for the deck to function properly, but I do not want to see her in my hand.
Ever.
If I do, however, she's what I like to call a soft brick.
Because you have ways to play with it.
In my hand. It's not great because it's taking up a slot that could have been something else.
Exactly.
But I can still actually utilize it, as opposed to something like the old Gem Knight Garnet, where if you drew it, you hard bricked.
Yeah, there's nothing you can do with it at that point.
Yeah, outside of just normal summon it as a big beat stick. Because at the time the Gemnite fusion, I don't remember the actual name of the fusion spell that you would use to make Lapis, the extra normal summon, could only fuse from deck. It could not do it from hand or field.
God, Gemini
So if-
Fusion.
Yeah. So if you drew the Garnet,
No, Brilliant Fusion.
yeah, Brilliant Fusion, yeah. So if you drew Gemnite Garnet, you couldn't Brilliant Fuse into Lapis.
Yeah. So, if it's a card, though, that is a very good card that your deck needs, but is like extremely searchable, or maybe it's a card that you want to see, but not necessarily in every opener.
Yeah. Or even a case if you don't have to see it, your combo is just going to get it for you anyway.
Right. Then you run two of that. Now, there's a little bit of differing theory here and there on different cards. Like, I know 2 or 3 Incredible Ecclesia the Virtuous was a pretty big debate for quite a long time. But at the end of the day, you are the only person that can decide what is right for you, for your strategy, and for your ideas and ideals.
And your
So.
particular deck and play style.
Yes. Now, with all of that said, we hope that the next time you go into deck building, and the next time that you go into the tank and you go to try to make something new, that you have a much better idea of exactly how you want to make that happen and make it all come together. Now, what do you say we do a few mailbag questions?
Ooh, yeah, that was a long discussion, but I think it was a good one that needed to happen.
Yes, very comprehensive. So, first one. Why is Fluffle Penguin the cutest Pokemon card?
Because penguins.
Okay, there's a couple of things wrong with here. One, it's obviously not a Pokemon card. Two,
I mean,
even if you make Yu-Gi-Oh card, Fluffle Penguin is not the cutest Yu-Gi-Oh card.
it's up there though.
It's clearly Ojama Yellow.
Sure. I was going to say Bopple, but okay.
All right, next we have, of course, let's see, Copper Cracked. Super Poly and Stealth Crag can control to summon Mudragon of the Swamp. Sounds pretty cracked, I'm not going to lie.
I mean, it's not a bad idea.
Yeah. Do you think that the game would be more balanced if there were less generic cards? Not like no Emporium or no Ash, but more along the lines of if Verte required a Predaplant, or even just a plant monster, or if Hulk required a machine or a Crystron monster.
I think the power ceiling of the game would be lower overall,
I agree.
but that doesn't necessarily mean the game is more balanced.
That is fair, but I think it actually is more balanced that way.
Yeah, in this exact situation, it probably would.
Yeah.
A great example of that if access code required a code talker,
Right. Or if Borreload Savage Dragon required a rocket monster.
or just even a dark dragon as one of its materials, because that's
Right.
All rockets are dark dragons. So
Yes.
but then it also lets you make him with some of the non-rocket dragons that rockets would pump out, like Delindorus or Triboral or something like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, in that exact situation, it would make more balance because it's easier to balance around stuff if you know it's unless you specifically want it to work with the deck.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, the game would be more balanced overall. Particularly, one big issue is that you won't have the surprise ancient cards coming back all of a sudden.
Right.
What was that card's name? King of the Swamp all of a sudden coming back.
Yeah, I was thinking Smoke Grenade of the Thief.
Yeah, Smoke Grenade Thief, another great example. But mostly because the power ceiling would also be lower.
Yeah. What is a place you would like to see start hosting YCS events that normally doesn't? Dog. We need a YCS New Orleans.
Yes, that'd be cool.
It has never happened. New Orleans is one of the largest metropolitan areas in the country. It has one of the best communities in the country. And it is a great, great city for people to visit. I really cannot stress enough how incredibly disheartening it is that New Orleans has never had a YCS.
The museums.
Oh my goodness. The World War II Museum in New Orleans is one of the coolest experiences I've ever had in my entire life.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
My favorite building though is museum is the aquarium though.
Audubon Aquarium?
Yeah.
Dude, Audubon Aquarium is amazing.
But I'm personally more interested in aquariums than than museums that are focused on one specific thing.
Yeah. Also in New Orleans is casinos.
If that's your thing.
Yeah.
I get plenty of gambling from opening packs of Yu-Gi-Oh! Thank you very much.
Honestly though.
I don't even open packs that often.
You know, I don't either. But
I just don't think I have a big appetite for gambling is what it is.
when I do open packs, I cannot stop. Like, it's not going to be one box. It's going to be like 3.
I'm lucky and that my lack of money keeps me from just buying more.
Yeah, my lack of money doesn't keep me from buying more. We need more patrons to support my pack addiction. So,
Sure.
that's all I'm saying, dog.
Oh boy.
That's all I'm saying. All right, well, I think that is actually going to wrap it up for today's episode of the Top Cut Podcast. We got a short one for you today on this wonderful Friday. I think that it is worth saying again, if you enjoyed, be sure to go ahead and subscribe. Hit the like button. Leave a comment. Tell us what you thought. And come in the Discord server. Bring us some mailbag questions. We're running short. Please. And, of course, we want to thank all of our wonderful sponsors again. Gem, ETB, Millennium Threads, Dragon Shield, and TCG Player. And until next time, have a great weekend, everybody.
Take care, everybody.